Hey, welcome to another episode of the Businessology Show. This is so exciting as we go into the show's 10th year. So this 2022 is going to be the 10th year for the show, and we're so excited. I never thought we'd be going this long after Dan Mall and I started this show in January 2013. So this is so exciting. And also, what's exciting is that we're changing things up. So the format of any of the podcasts I've led before have typically either been co-host led or they've always had a guest. And so that is just a model in a way that we've always run a show, but we're switching some things up in 2022. We're really excited about it, but we want your feedback on it. So this show is going to be an educational show, and it'll probably get even close to an hour in this first time. And so here's what we're doing in 2022. The first show of each quarter in 2022 is going to be an educational concept show. And why is that? Well, it's because we love the shows and the things we learn from guests, but what we do, and you know the Businessology show has always been hosted by our firm, Blumer CPAs. And what we do in Blumer CPAs is we do consulting. We have programs. We have educational programs for agency owners to help them become more strategic as they lead and grow their agencies. And so some components of this show, if you're listening in audio, I have some slides I'm going to be using because this is also a visual show. So there's slide decks and you can watch them on YouTube. But for those who are in audio, I just want to let you know I'm going to be very overt to explain the things on the screen so that you can understand what I'm talking through in this education. But I want your feedback. So this is a new twist on a show we want to try. And it's because we want to give you the education. We want to give you the things we're really good at, the things we've been doing for decades in our firm. My dad started it many years ago, and so this coming November, it'll be going into 25 years this firm's been around. I've been leading it for 20 years, or almost 20 of those years. So real exciting. So the reason we want to do this is because we have programs in our firm for agency owners, and one of those is a Fusion Agency Summit, and that's coming up April 5th through 7th. That's a 3-day live event for a small group of agency owners. About 15 agencies can come. And we go deep into some of the things I'm going to be talking about today, but we go deep into an experience of learning about these things, applying them to your own agency, coaching with other agencies, giving presentations at the Fusion Agency Summit. You have to actually give presentations, and then other agencies can comment on the things that you're learning and growth. So it's a transformative experience. We've done it before. We also lead virtual programs. So we have something called the Agency Prototype Masterclass. And so this class starts every July, and it's based upon the things we're going to be talking about today in this show as we try a new format. And so I'm going to talk through what you see on the screen and try to be open about the fact that some of you can't, that you're not seeing it. You're listening to it on audio. But two things, again, send us feedback, info@blumercpas.com. That is our open email inbox, and we'll get anything in there. So send any feedback, whether you like this deeper educational part to our show. And again, we're only going to do it the first quarter of just the first show of each quarter because we want to test it out. The other shows will still have guests. Also, go to the show notes of this show, and that's on our website. Go to the show notes of the show, and we're going to put the PDF of these slides that we're going to be going through there. So if you want to ever stop and really just go through it, then you'll have the slides you can go through. Or if you want to see me and watch the slides, you can go to the Blumer CPA's YouTube channel, and you will find the shows being posted there every month. So we're excited about trying this new format. And I really just want to say again, please send us feedback at info@blumercpas.com so we can still continue to do this well. But we're so excited about the education we do through our live events and through our virtual courses that we take agency owners through. It's really exciting. The homework you go through in that Agency Prototype Masterclass is pretty deep. And it's all based upon what we're going to be talking about today, on something called the prototype components model for growth. I'm going to stop and take water and coffee drinks every now and then so we can go through this education. So this show will be a little bit longer than what we'll do in most quarterly educational shows, because I really want to go through this particular proprietary model we've created for agencies. And how did this come about? So we do a lot of consulting with agencies. Not only does our firm, Blumer CPAs, do the accounting, tax, and manage the full financial processes of larger agencies, we always do coaching and consulting with agencies too. And then we also, as a firm, which is unlike a lot of firms that are able to do, we have our own programs and our own live events we run and have been doing this for many years. So these are not new things for us. We've done this for many, many years. And it's a very enjoyable part of what we do. What we had to do in some of that consulting is we started seeing patterns in some of the changes or some of the common things that a lot of our clients were struggling with. And so as we worked through it, we found we had to develop a model to start walking a lot of our consulting through. And over the years, we started probably developing this model in 2018. We were consulting before that, but we had to start locking something down to help guide our clients through. And in 2018, we started developing what is now known as the prototype components model for growth. And we're going to talk about why all of those words are in there, prototype components model for growth. But it is our proprietary model. It's a growth model we created to really guide us in consulting, and now it's made its way into live events and programs that we would love for you to participate in. So let's dive into what it looks like. So if you're watching on YouTube, you see the screen, you see what we call an isometric. This is really just the full visible view of the prototype components model for growth. It's laid out in a number of different ways. So basically what this model does is it allows you to prototype your agency. And that's the thing. To be strategic, we want you to get the full impact of the full view of what building your agency looks like. Like if you built the whole thing from scratch, here's what you could build to make it very valuable. And then build on top of that. So you get to prototype, which is, a prototype is something you kind of build in advance of making the original. This gives you that ability to prototype your business and not just bump into things when you need to do it, but look at a full-blown model to say, whatever size agency you are, if you're working on these things, then you're going to be building a strategic company that can sustainably scale over time. And so when I say these things, if you're working on these things, what are those? Those are the components. So in the prototype components model for growth, there are 10 components. And if you're looking at the screen on this visible isometric, they are 10 white boxes. The 10 white boxes are then divided into 5 on one side of the screen and 5 on the other. And how is it split up? Well, the way we break this prototype components model up for growth is split into 2 sections. The right-hand side is the market side. The left-hand side is the service side. And so first of all, that's some of the big teaching right there, is that entrepreneurs are imbalanced people. Typically, I'm an entrepreneur and I've been doing this for a long time and I'm imbalanced. So I don't get things right. So based upon fear or a desire to control or whatever it may be, we find entrepreneurs really swinging for the ditches. That's kind of what they do. That's a behavioral response they have to companies that aren't working. And so what do I mean by that? Well, when they run into some growth ceiling or a wall they can't surmount, or their agency's humming along and then their creative director quits or something like that and throws a huge bomb, into it, they'll swerve for a ditch and they'll be like, I'm shutting this thing down, or they'll do something crazy like that, or they'll just outsource everything, right? They'll just make very what we call responsive or non-strategic decisions. So the prototype components model, or any kind of model to help you grow or scale your business, necessarily needs to be a balancing model, especially for service-based companies. And that's our specialty. We help people scale services-based organizations. And why is that different than like a retail organization or a manufacturing organization? Well, I hope there are experts in those niches too, and I know that there are. But for us, it's important because we understand that when you're building a services-based company, really everything is centered around human relationships. So we like to say leading human organizations, LHO. Sometimes leading human organizations is difficult. And when we say human organizations, we mean service-based companies. Everything is filtered through a relationship. So you are learning to lead and manage yourself. You're learning to lead and care for a team. They're the ones who provide the service to produce the revenue. And then, of course, you have relationships with your clients. And the team relationships are more intimate than they are with the clients. And then, of course, you're even way more intimate with your own struggles and things like that as an entrepreneur. So service-based entrepreneurship is a particular thing. You're not just building a company. You're always doing everything through the lens of a relationship. And if you don't keep that layer in mind, you're going to struggle through a lot of the growth issues. And it's probably or possibly why you're having struggles growing if you're not considering the fact that, hey, you're first of all in a relationship with that person. So when you're asking a team member to work in a different way or whatever, you're filtering that through the trust that they have with you and the leadership that they trust in you to them in that relationship. So filtering everything through a relationship is how you are doing it. This model helps you remain balanced as you do that. And it has a lot of those relational components, culture building components in it. So it's been a great model. We use it in all of our consulting now, and it's just really been valuable to help us explain and understand things. So as you're looking at this visual, and again, I hope you'll download the PDF of these slides. If you're listening in an audio format, I think you're still going to get tons of value. But if you want, go to the show notes of our show and download the PDF slides from the show notes. And so as you're looking at the model, it's got the 10 white boxes, the 10 components. They're numbered. The first one has number 1 on it, and then 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. And the order of those is very important, which we're going to mention in a minute. And then, of course, it's split into 2. There are 5 components on the market side, which is on the right-hand side of this model. And there are 5 components on the service side, which is on the left-hand side of this model. And those two sides are intertwined with each other. And we're going to talk about that as we go through this model. So that's the first thing you want to notice, that we're meant to try to balance entrepreneurs in their work. Now, another thing about this model is that if people are trying to scale their organization, a lot of times they're sometimes not knowingly leaning towards what we say the service side of their company. If they think something's out of control, they're gonna tweak or change something in their team, their revenue, something like that. But what we find is there's a whole market side, right, to what we do. And so we find service entrepreneurs and probably a lot of small business owners fail to really focus on a market side like they should. The market is where your clients come from. They're the one. That's the economic, market that you operate in, whatever world or country whatever part of the world or the country you're in. Your clients are coming out of a particular market. For example, our market is still struggling from the effects of the pandemic. Specifically, labor is really kind of messed up right now. We just had the, jobs report come out for economics, and it's at a very high that 4.5 million people quit their jobs in November, which is a huge deal. That's gone up, and there are 10 million jobs in the United States that need to be filled. And really only 7 million people looking for jobs. So our labor market is kind of messed up, and those are just the economic numbers from the Bureau of Labor Statistics from the U.S. So that market is something. And so that's where you get your clients from. That's where you get your team from. And so you're meant to look at the market. And so we have this isometric. You can look at it. It's balanced. The right-hand side is market. And you do need to be considering your market. You need to be reading your market. That market really is kind of a leading indicator as to how you need to change and build your agency so that you can remain healthy. And that's why actually when we dive into the components now, which are these white boxes, the very first component is called client focuses, number one, and it's located on the market side. And what we like to say, so right now, let's kind of move into talking about each of these 10 boxes, each of these components. And so the first one, client focuses, this is actually on the market side. And this really begins the justification of you having a business, right? So if there's not a sliver or a narrowness of the market that you can choose to say, we're going to serve this group of people, then really there's not a justification for your company existing. And so basically we're saying component number one, client focuses, is saying if you want to build a company the right way, you do need to choose a part of the market you're wanting to serve. It's very difficult to serve as a generalist. We know that people who become experts and price their services very high have some sense of narrowness in the way they serve. And you can define narrowness or niching in a lot of different ways. You could niche vertically, right? It could be by industry. It could be, you want to serve nonprofits or something like that. So you can vertically do that. You can horizontally niche, which might be around a very particular narrowness of a service you want to provide. So your market may be more broad and the choice of your service is more narrow. You could narrow around demographics, women-owned businesses, or the Hispanic market. So there's a lot of demographics you could dive into. What you're meant to do is take the risk of narrowing, and that's how you begin justifying the fact that I'm going to build a company that does this. Now, you might say, do I niche from the outset? Well, a lot of people who start a small business, they just start out as generalists, right? They start doing whatever anybody will pay them to do, and that's fine. So client focuses is something you grow into. Now, you want to do it slowly. As we like to say, you can't narrow too deep, but you can narrow too fast. And so when you're trying to choose a market, you can't really make the choice up front. Here's the right market with the narrowness that's going to support my company. So you kind of roll into that. You feel your way into a client focus. But at some point, you do need to make a commitment to it. And you're like, okay, this is who I think we're for. After 5 to 7 years of operating, you want to get to a point where you can go ahead and lock down a narrow part of your market, which that narrowness gives you power to start becoming an expert. And it also is the risk in that you're starting to say no to all other parts of the market. Now, risk is how you make money. Risk leads to profit. So taking risks is what you must do as an agency owner. And client focuses and narrowing is your first step toward taking that risk and deciding there's a part of the market we're best for. All right, so that's client focuses. That's the first component. You'll see that on the right-hand side in the market side. Now let's go to component number 2. Now what it does is it flips you over to the service side of this model. So if you're looking at it now, there's a right-hand side and a left-hand side of the model. Client focuses is on the right. When you go to component number 2, which is called client alignment, that kicks you all the way over to the service side. Now, you, as the entrepreneur in your agency, you're meant to do your work and align that market now with the particular person you want to come into your agency. So on the market side, client focuses is where you don't know the names of those people, but when they have filled out a form online or something like that, they pop into component number 2, client alignment. This is where you're meant to run them through maybe what you'd call a client value profile. A client value profile is the perfect kind of person that would fit best for your agency, for your market, for the money you want to make, for the services that you're meant to provide. And the point here is balancing these two. One is choosing a market. The second one is choosing the human, right? Now in a client alignment model or component, you now have a name of a lead, right? Your leads sit here, and this is where you're not meant to take everybody. And we like to say that the strategic door in your agency is the front door. It is meant to remain closed. And so the front strategic door that you let clients in is one you let them in when you open it. And so in this client alignment component, you'll find we have a pretty extensive onboarding process of 4 to 6 weeks. And that's meant to try to align with people. And what does alignment take? It takes time. So you need some amount of time. Speed is probably never going to be your friend if you're doing high-end, high-valuable services. And so our onboarding process is really meant to find out, who are these people? Are they right for us? Will they let us lead them? Because us leading our clients is a big part of where we know we're going to be successful. So client alignment becomes that secondary filter. The market client focus, component number 1, is the market we're targeting, and now we're trying to get the right humans into our firm, and that's a key part of that client alignment. That's a big part because if you get the wrong clients in your agency, it's hard to get them out, and it's hard to serve them if, in fact, they don't trust you in that service. But onboarding is a way you can drive a lot of that trust into your agency. All right, now component number 3 is we flip over back to the market side. So if you're looking at this model, the third step, which is value propositions, that's the third component, now is on the market side. And again, it's flipping back and forth, right? Component 1 was on the market side, component 2 was on the service side. Now component 3 is back over here on the market side, which is value propositions. This is now where you're meant to call out to your market. Now that you know who they are, and you know the client value profile, you know which people you need to bring into your company. Now it's time for you to call out to them. And this is really our positioning component, right? This is where you position accurately. And we've just done we just did a show with Dan Mall last year on positioning. Great show. So you want to listen to that. That's value propositions component 3 in this model. And value propositions is where you're meant to be somewhat polarizing. This is where you're now calling out to your market in very strategic ways, saying, here's who we're for, here's who we're not for. And a lot of times you can develop a love-hate relationship with a market, which is probably better than being bland in general, where you want your clients seeing your messaging and going, you're not for me, or you are for me. It just depends on what we're trying to do with the value propositions. But the value propositions is like your elevator speech to the market. So that's really important part of what you're doing to position yourself well. So that's component number 3. And then what we do is we flip over to component number 4, vision and values. So vision and values is now on the service side, and this is where you're calling out to your team members. And so just like on the market side where you were doing value propositions to call out to your market, now vision and values is where it's kind of your positioning to your team, and we call it vision and values as the component. And that's because you lead your company. All service-based companies are led with a vision and a purpose. That's typically a statement. We exist to is some kind of statement as to why you exist. And then you lead with your values too. Core values are a strong part of what internally lead teams and create culture. So vision and values now in this component number 4 is you're calling out to your team to lead them, right? Just like value propositions, you're saying, hey, clients, will you let us lead you? Will you trust us to do that? In component number 4, vision and values, you're saying, hey, team, we know who we're for. We know we're going to bring the right client in. We're calling out to the clients to bring them in. Are you ready to go with us and serve who we've determined to serve in these first 3 components? That's key. And so vision and values is now what you do with your team. We actually do a vision and values presentation to our team every year. We're always calling out to our team and letting them know, here's what we think the future is going to be this year. Here's the themes of growth. When we see if their core values are going to change. Our core values don't change that often. Core values are things you may update every 4 to 5 years or 5 to 6 years or whatever. It's not something you change a lot. And your purpose statement is, it changes about the same frequency. As your market, as you determine who you're going to serve differently in your market, your purpose may change. But if you've determined your market and who you're going to serve, then your purpose statement is going to be about the same. And so now vision and values is something we do, and there's a lot of work we do on vision and values. A lot of our clients do vision and value presentations to their team annually, and it is a way to call out to them and really help them, grow and follow you as a leader. So one thing about the prototype components model for growth, I want to stop right here and just point out what we've gone through so far. And I know you can't see it, but again, there are 10 white boxes, 10 components to this prototyping model for growth. We've gone through the first 4, 1, 2, 3, 4. 2 of those was on the market side and 2 was on the service side. And so it's really important. We went from one side of the up to the other. If you're looking at this model, you'll note that these 4 components are really our foundational components. These are the foundational ones just don't change over time, right? The choice of the market we serve and how we call our team, these things just don't really change more often. And now what we're doing is we're moving into a part of the market where we're going into the alleys. We're going into what we call alleys on either side. And that's what we're about to go into next. So you've got your foundational components in place. Now we're moving into component 5, and that enters us into what we call outreach alley on the market side. And that is components 5, 6, and 7. So service offerings, market rhythms, and revenue structures. And service offerings is the listing of what you can offer to your market. And so service offerings now is in outreach alley. Now you're just starting the practical work of letting the market know, hey, here's the things you can now buy from us. You can consume from us. And the service offerings really is just your listing of what your market, the chosen market you want to serve, wants to purchase from you. And so why would service offerings be on the market side? It seems like that might be a service side. Well, the service offerings are really owned by the market. That's really a listing of the things that your market wants to consume and purchase from you, from the choices you've made, the narrowness of the market, the kind of person you want to serve in your company, the kind of client you want to serve. Service offerings has to reflect what this market you've chosen now needs to consume from a firm like yours regularly. And just like any narrowness choice is a risk, like it was in client focuses, a narrowness choice here in component 5 is going to really drive some strategy. It's risky to say we're not going to do everything, even for everybody in our market. You're going to start choosing what you want to offer and what you believe you want to build your skills around. And so this is going to further narrow you into what you want to serve. Now, your service offerings do need to reflect what your market wants to purchase, but it still is a narrow choice. So component 5, service offerings, then goes into the next component, component 6, which you see on the screen, which is market rhythms. And so market rhythms, you'll see market rhythms mirror service rhythms on the service side. And rhythms are a very deep, strong part to this model. And why is that? Because rhythms are a very deep, strong part to a service-based organization. Service organizations need a cadence to them to be strategic. Arbitrary, confusing, disheveled, and just confusing, crazy companies are not ones that service-based teams or clients can really just can't grow in those. So market rhythms are really important that you start establishing the cadence of how you reach out to your market, how you call them to purchase now the service offerings that you offer, and other market rhythms, social platforms, reach out, blogs, any kind of way. Market rhythms are the habitual things you do to continue to push out your value propositions to the chosen narrow market you've created or chosen in component number 1. And then this outreach alley ends with 5, 6, and 7. And 7 is now revenue structures, right? So everything up to this point was pointing us to component number 7, revenue structures. And revenue structures are now how you get your money, right? This might be the cadence of, do you draft your money? Do you pull in, 50% upfront, 25%? Is it some kind of retainer basis? All of this needs to fund really what takes you over to the service side, which is the next component, which is team structures, component number 8. Now, before we get into that, I want to talk about there's a thing you can't see unless you're looking at this on YouTube. There's a bridge, what we call a bridge between components 7 and 8 that bridges the two sides, right? Component number 7 is the end of Outreach Alley on the market side. And so it ends in component 7, which is revenue structures. Revenue structures has a capacity exchange bridge over to component 8, which is team structures. And so this attachment has 2 full days of education built into what the capacity exchange bridge is, but this is really a lot of teaching around the theory of capacity in service-based organizations. So revenue structures leads how you build team structures, which is component number 8, and takes us over to the service side. So we're not going to dive into the capacity exchange bridge right now. That's not something we want to get into because there's so much to it. Maybe we'll hit it on one of these other quarterly educational pieces. But just suffice it to say that any up channel component affects a down channel component. And so what do I mean by that? Well, revenue structures is number 7, and we're going to talk about the orders in a minute. But number 7 leads to component 8, team structures. So team structures is built according to how the revenue structures has the money funding your team structures. And basically what this means is the team structures, you can only build a team according to the model that has been given you from all the other choices you made in the first 7 components. So team structures is the down channel component affected by all components before that. So there's a lot to that, but before we instead of getting into the depths of that, I just want to say now what this model has done is it's brought us over now to the service side. And we're now entering into the last part of the model, which is leadership alley, revenue structures, which is component 8, service rhythms, component 9, and then the last component is accountable processes. And these are all related. This is where we see service organizations go to either scale well or not scale well. And by that, what we mean is this is where you really get it right. So we find agency owners that are really embedded in the leadership of their organization. They stay involved in components 8, 9, and 10, which are team structure building a team structure that will support the revenue and the market you've chosen to serve. Not build the team structure you want to build the one that necessitates providing the service you've created by choosing the first 7 components and the choices you've made in those first 7 components. And then after you build your team structure, you apply component number 9 to that team and to your company, service rhythms. Service rhythms are the habitual cadences of rhythms that drive safety and often transparency in a team, letting you lead with care so that your team really does feel the weight of your care. And so culture is really driven in a major way in service rhythms that are just habitual ways. Like, for example, weekly team meetings, or we have quarterly meetings with our team privately so we can hear from them privately about the struggles they're having in their role. These kind of rhythms really drive a lot of care into that team. And then, of course, the last component ends with accountable processes, component 10. And this is really just the consistency of how you provide your service. These are ordered, numbered steps that you have documented for each of your services, or most of the time for a lot of your clients too. Your clients have their own processes within your firm, within your agency. And then accountable processes are where you hold your team accountable. They're not just processes that are published, but then there's follow-up from leadership to say, are we following those? Because we know this in service-based companies. When they have service that is consistently followed, it increases the value of that agency over time. Okay, so that's a lot to the prototype components model for growth. If you were listening on audio, I know you couldn't see all that, but just feel free to give us feedback, info@Blumer CPAs, to help us know how to continue to speak this in an audio way that you can understand this model that I really want you to see as you download the PDF slides from this, from the Businessology website. So let's move on now to some particular parts of the prototype model. And we won't stay too long here, but just to wrap this up, the balance and orders really matters. So as we balance that, I'm going to read some slides that, if you're watching on YouTube, you can see them, but in audio, you can't. So let me read one side that gives more specifics about the market components. The market components are generally not controllable aspects of the prototype model. They are informing and leading. And again, you can't control a market. You're only meant to read that market and serve it as best you can. So we let that market inform and lead. The service components are generally controllable aspects of the prototype. So that the service side are ones you do control. And so you're meant to observe a market, and you're also meant to be responsive to what you think the market is teaching you. Specifically, right now in our market, as you're dealing with labor issues in your agency, not being able to find the right people, you're meant to respond to that and read to that and strategically think about your future and not just necessarily do what you've always done. So the market components, they inform the service components as you observe the market. That's what this slide is showing us now. And the market components lead us as the service side. You're meant to be responsive to the leadership you're seeing from that market component. So let me read some things just to lay this out. So what we see is successful agencies take risks to narrow in a way that they can see patterns that guide their informing behavior. So informing behavior from a market is what you're meant to read. And the way you read it is to narrow the service of the market you're going after. You need to narrow it because you can't generally read the whole market. If you're a general broad agency, you just cannot read a whole market. If you're narrow, you can more easily read that market. And on the service side, let me read this part of the slide to you. It says, successful agencies take risks to test a market's adaptations with new service offerings that teach them their place. And so what does that mean? Well, we're talking about how do we read a market? Well, one way we can do that is we can take risks as an agency, and we can produce new things, new innovations of services, new service models, new levels of pricing. And as we roll these and pitch these into our market or to the leads that come into our agency, it teaches us our place. And basically that means it teaches us what we can and can't do and how we can respond to this market. I mean, one real example right now is I think our market has a layer of fear on it, right? There's such an unknown part to our market, to the labor. And so that affects people's behaviors as to what they'll spend or not spend. Well, you need to be responding, not switching and, hitting ditches, but you need to respond and really know what that means for your agency. Okay, we have the prototype components model up on the screen again. I just want to make a note about the balancing parts to the model. The order is the art of balancing the prototype between service and market, and assessing misordered building of a service agency. So let me break down what that means. So what does the order mean? These components are numbered in order. There's 10 of them. We've just talked through 10. Excuse me. And if you're looking at the screen, you can see those 10 white boxes. Well, the order they go in matters, right? So when we do consulting, what we found as a pattern over time is we found that a lot of people in consulting with an agency were having trouble because they were trying to build certain parts of the component out of order. And so basically, team structures component 8 was out of order. They were trying to build a team structure without considering the first 7 components that had already gone into that. They didn't know, but they were arbitrarily making decisions about these other 7 components. And we do find people just arbitrarily make decisions about these components. They just don't know they're doing it. And it is affecting the down channel component of, say, team structure number 8. And if you don't build team structure strategically according to the very specific decisions you made in the up channel components, the first 7, then you're building an agency out of order, is what we find. And so if we go to an agency and they're like, we can't figure out our team structure and we want to work on that, Well, what we'll do is we'll double check the first 7. Like, are you serving a particular market? Are you bringing them in through a client alignment, component? Are you reaching out to them with a value proposition? Are you leading your team through a vision and values presentation or in ways that call them to the work you're meant to do? So have you built out of order something that's never going to work until we assess and look at those other components? And we find that has generally been true. Agency owners, not knowingly, have gotten things out of order. Now, how did they not know? Well, because they didn't have this model. And so that's why we drive this model into our programs and into our consulting, because it is a visible way to see your whole agency in one fell swoop. So you can prototype your way through it to really know, all right, I'm going to build this thing better and I'm going to do it in order. And so a lot of what we're doing in consulting is unraveling the dysfunction from misordered building through the prototype components model. But it's visible and it gives us something to go by, and we go down the numbers and really helping agencies understand where they may have gotten tripped up. So it's a beautiful way to help you build in a more ordered, strategic way your company. Let's talk about drivers. So there are 2 drivers to the market and the service side. And so let me read the slide basically that you can see if you're watching on YouTube. It says the drivers are the global overall goals of each side of a balanced prototype components model. So there is something that drives how you look at either side of the model. So let's think about service. On the service side, what is the driver? And it is to decrease your agency's risk. That's what you're always doing. Risk is necessary. You have to take risk to grow your company, but you're always trying to de-risk as effectively as you can. So just completely living on the edge with as much risk as you can is not, that's a stressful way to live or to lead a company. So you're always trying to figure out how to de-risk an agency. So that's the driver on the service side. And on the market side, you're always trying to increase your client's value. And so everything you do is to find clients that you can increase their value. And with that, your price generally can go up if you're always being valuable. Now, we talked about it in component number 10, accountable processes. Being consistent in your services and being able to promise that you will deliver your services in very specific ways. If you got your service offerings, component 6, right, and you know the service offerings you want to offer, then being very consistent in how you deliver those through your processes always increases the value of your agency. Consistency creates value for service-based organizations always. So, and what is consistency fighting? It's always fighting chaos. Teams don't thrive in chaos, and that's why service rhythms and market rhythms are there. These cadences, they cool down the chaos and create a sense of order. And that's where scaling and value can always be created in a services-based organization. So as we end up here, I want to drive the rest of this podcast and this education with some questions around the drivers on either side. And we're going to do it in the way that we just listed, which the service side driver, how do you decrease your agency's risk? And your market side driver, how do you increase your client's value? I'm going to ask you some questions to consider in how you're leading your own agency. So the first one on the service side, again, this is the side of your company, the more controllable aspects of the model. I want to ask you, what service model are we putting up with or doing it like we've always done it that has inherent, embedded, unnecessary risk in our company? And that's always true. There's always a model you're operating under that has some inherent embedded risk. So identifying what that is going to be a step towards de-risking your agency. Here's another identifier of potential risk in your agency. What would happen if our team operated without us or me on a short-term basis? What would happen? And that's a reflection of the risk. Hey, even in our own firm, if me or my partner stepped away for a short period of time, our team would struggle. And so that is a place where we bear some risk. And it is something we're always working on with, the promotion of team, investing in teaching team, bringing them to senior and leadership positions. Those are the kind of things we're working to do, and it takes years to de-risk our company in that way. Here's another question about de-risking your agency's risk. What is our methodology for client problem diagnosis? And so there is a real strategy to a service company who has a specific methodology to do discovery around their clients before they come in. That's what you're going to do in component 2. Remember, component 2 was client alignment. Client alignment is where you're really doing the discovery of what you're meant to figure out. And again, you don't want to be arbitrary. If you're arbitrary in how you assess a client, you're going to be assessing the client wrong. And assessing a client up front and the scope you eventually offer, that's where you're going to find your agency becomes more and more valuable, is in the diagnosis of how you do discovery. You want to figure a way. You always do it the same way. For us, it's client onboarding, and it may take 4 to 6 weeks. And it's the most important part of your service, I believe. And here's a fourth question on de-risking your agency. And again, de-risking is on the service side. That's a driver that drives the service side. And here's the fourth question. Where are we or me in the way of our agency operating efficiently? So inevitably the owner, that's the we or the me, the owner is in the way a lot of times. The owners are the ones, the service entrepreneurs are the ones who get in the way of service, thereby driving up the risk of the operation of the service side of the agency. So where or how can you get out of the way? And then on market side driver, increase your client's value. So here's some questions to consider to increase your client's value. What has our team been hearing about requests for service being made by our clients? So this is how you're reading the tea leaves of your market, right? But you're doing it through your client base, and your team starts to hear what are the things they keep needing or wanting to have you provide to them. And as you hear those things, those requests for service are being made by your clients. Those are things you can start to leverage to increase the value of your clients, your client base. Second question on the market side is we're trying to figure out how can we increase our clients' value. How might we or me be catering to our clients by offering too many services to too many clients? And so so you're going to find this very consistently in a high-end, expert-based agencies. You're going to find their client base is somewhat a good bit lower. So lower client base headcounts is a real part to strategy. So sometimes when clients, come to us and they're just glutted and they don't know what to do, a lot of times it's from the chaos of such a large client base. And we narrow them. We say, and generalists typically who serve anybody in the market typically can build a very big client base, which drives a lot of chaos, a lot of unknown things, a lot of confusion, and you can't scale in that situation. So we'll want to narrow them and go, now, strategically, how can we lower your head count of your client base? That is a part of growth, and it's so counterintuitive, but this question leads to that. Sometimes we cater out of fear by offering tons of services to as many clients as possible that will pay us. That is a strategy that you may adopt when you first start your agency, but you cannot grow in that way. And so when you get to team sizes between 3 and 5, you have to start making decisions about narrowness in your life and in your agency's life and lower those headcounts, or you just won't be able to get much larger than that. Or at least without chaos, you won't. So the third question in increasing your client's value is, what new services do our clients need that we've not yet created or sold? And so we love to create new services. Creating new services, which is something we try to do annually as we're pitching what we do into our market, is a way to help us find our place in our market. Do they find value in this new innovative service we've made up? And so you should always be asking, what do our clients want to purchase from us that we haven't created yet? That's a hard question to answer because it's a creative brainstorming result to come up with something like that. But it is something you want to consider to increase your client's value. And here's a fourth question you can consider. on increasing your client's value. How well does our revenue fund our investments in leadership and in innovation? And basically, the gist of that is that your revenue structures, do you remember revenue structures was component 7, revenue structures on the market side? That's meant to fund not only the operational expenses in the team, but also revenue's meant to fund your profit. Well, it funds something other than that too. It funds a savings account, right? You want to have leftover money to fill up a savings account, because savings accounts are where you spend your leadership and innovation money. And just a practical way to think about that, if you build up, we say 3 to 6 months worth of operating expenses in your savings account, at least at a minimum. And some of our agencies are building way more than that now because they're doing really well. But it's from those savings account where you fund like a new role, right? And so you're finding chaos, and you need more leadership in your service, in your company, and you want to invest in a new leadership role. Well, you invest out of that savings account. So you want your revenue structures funding that leadership, that future leadership and innovation that you're going to be getting into. Okay, so this is our first attempt at the education of in the podcast that we're going to be doing quarterly. And so on the screen, I'm showing again the prototype components model for growth, the full model that shows the balanced model of the 10 components on each side. I want you to download these PDFs, these slides, so you can look through those. But we really also want the feedback around consuming the education in a podcast in this way. We're going to do it each quarter. So make sure you shoot us some feedback at info@blumercpas.com. And we're going to tweak and change this. So thank you for joining us on this. There's one aspect, we define growth on the slides. I'm not going to read those out to you. So I hope you'll actually go get the slides to see what that definition of growth is. And we'd like to throw that in there because a lot of people think growth is just go get more revenue. That's not what it means at all. So that's why we define growth for agencies. So I just want to say thank you for letting us experiment with this new educational model in the podcast. Again, please let us hear your feedback at info@blumercpas.com. Tell us just what you love, what you don't love, and help us know how to deliver this education in more creative ways, because we want you to understand we provide a lot of education, and we want to give that to you as listeners of our show. So thank you for joining us on this first show of the Businessology Show in 2022. We can't wait to hear from you, and we'll see you next month. Take care.